What if the most dangerous weapon used in the Middle East last night wasn't a missile or a bomb? It was silence. Not the silence of peace. The silence of a nation that just lost its eyes, its ears, and its ability to see what's coming next. Before we go any further, if you're someone who actually wants to understand what's happening in the world before the headlines catch up, hit subscribe right now. Like this video so more people can find it, and share it with one person who needs to hear the real story. Because what you're about to hear is not what the mainstream media is covering. Let's go back 36 hours. An American AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, one of the most advanced combat aircraft ever built, was operating near the Strait of Hormuz. It was part of an integrated naval task force working alongside U.S. Fifth Fleet units stationed in the Gulf region. Then something happened that changed the next 24 hours of global history. An Iranian one-way attack drone hit the Apache. Clean, precise, intentional. The helicopter went down into the dark waters near the Omani coast. 2 pilots ejected. And suddenly, the United States military had a decision to make. Now here's where most people think the story becomes about revenge. It doesn't. It becomes about something far more calculated, far more permanent. But first, let's understand what was already burning before that helicopter fell out of the sky. The weeks leading up to this moment were not quiet. A ceasefire framework that had been holding, barely, since early April was falling apart in real time. Iran had launched ballistic missiles into Israeli territory in retaliation for strikes on Hezbollah infrastructure in Beirut. Israel responded by targeting Iranian petrochemical facilities, specifically the ones supplying precursor chemicals used in ballistic missile production. The industrial heart of Iran's missile program was cracked open from the air. That is the backdrop. That is the temperature of the room when an Iranian drone put an American Apache helicopter into the Gulf. Washington made a choice, not to bomb a city, not to hit a power station, not to make a statement for the cameras. The choice was surgical, invisible, and devastating, in a way that most people watching the news cycle will never fully understand. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Those 2 Apache pilots were in the water, dark water, 20 kilometers of heavily patrolled sea, believed to contain Iranian naval mines, with Iranian Revolutionary Guard patrol boats in the area. In any previous conflict, a rescue like this would require sending another helicopter, another human crew, into hostile airspace. It would mean risking more lives. It would mean giving Iran a second target, a second opportunity for propaganda, maybe even a second opportunity for hostages. That didn't happen. Instead, a completely unmanned surface vessel, operated by the U.S. Navy's Task Force 59, which is the Fifth Fleet's Artificial Intelligence and Unmanned Systems Division based out of Bahrain, moved through that water without a single sailor on board. It found the pilots using infrared cameras. It extracted them. It returned them safely. Total time in the water, under 2 hours. No additional casualties, no faces for Iranian state media to broadcast, no soldiers to use as leverage in negotiations. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard watched a ghost ship rescue American pilots from under their noses and couldn't do anything about it. But that was just the opening move. The military operation that followed wasn't designed to punish Iran emotionally. It was designed to cripple Iran strategically. This, specifically, to eliminate Iran's ability to monitor, track, and respond to naval movement through the Strait of Hormuz. Here's why that matters. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow choke point through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply travels every single day. Whoever can see that strait, whoever can monitor the ships moving through it, vector drones toward them, or tip off fast attack boats, holds enormous strategic leverage over the global economy. Iran understood this. For decades, they built and maintained a network of radar stations, communications towers, drone hangars, and air defense systems on islands and coastal bases specifically designed to give them eyes over that strait. American fighter jets went to work on every single one of those eyes. The operation was led by EA-18G Growler aircraft. Electronic warfare jets operated by the U.S. Navy. These are not ordinary fighter jets. Their entire purpose is to flood an enemy's radar and communication systems with electronic noise so overwhelming that operators can't see, can't communicate, and can't coordinate. Military pilots refer to the electronic attack signal as music, and when the Growlers began playing that music over Iranian frequencies, every radar screen in the targeted facilities turned into static. Iranian operators tried a known counter tactic. They kept their radar systems powered off, hidden, hoping American jets would fly overhead, and then, at the last second, they would activate their systems and attempt a lock. It's a technique designed to deny American aircraft time to respond. It had worked before. It didn't work this time. Flying directly behind the Growlers were F-16C fighters equipped with the HARM targeting system, a sensor built specifically to detect, locate, and destroy radar emitters. The moment Iranian operators activated their systems, even briefly, the F-16CJs had a firing solution. The AGM-88 HARM missile they carry doesn't just follow a radar signal. It memorizes the geographic coordinates of the emission source. Even if the Iranian operator panicked and shut the system down mid-flight, the missile already knew where the antenna was. It hit anyway. 4 major locations were systematically dismantled. The first was Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval logistics hub and the operational heart of Revolutionary Guard maritime forces. The radar systems and ground control stations for their surface-to-air missile batteries were destroyed. These were the installations that had been tracking aerial movement across the Gulf. The second was Jask Airport on the southeastern coast, a critical communications and surveillance node. The large radar arrays and transmission antennas that had been monitoring the maritime channel were taken offline. The third was a naval base in Hormozgan province, a compound containing ammunition storage, anti-aircraft artillery, and a large radio control tower that was collapsed by precision munitions. The fourth, and perhaps most symbolically significant target, was the radar complex on the islands of Keshem and Hengam, 2 elevated positions that sit directly inside the strait itself, historically used to detect approaching vessels from both directions. The drone hangars on those islands received double strikes to ensure that Iran's aerial surveillance capability over the water was completely neutralized. When it was over, Iran could not see the strait it had spent 40 years learning to control. Now pause and think about what the United States chose not to hit. Power plants were untouched. Civilian bridges were untouched. Urban infrastructure was untouched. That restraint was not accidental. It was a message sent directly to Iranian leadership, deliberate, cold, and unmistakable. The message was, we know exactly what you have and where it is. We chose what to erase first, and we are still choosing. That kind of precision is more frightening than destruction. Destruction says, we attacked you. Precision says, we could have done much worse, and we still can. All right, you've stayed with this through some genuinely complex territory, and that tells me you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Here's a quick moment to ask, if this kind of analysis, no noise, no agenda, just the real architecture of what's happening, is what you want more of, then subscribe and turn on the bell. Every video we publish is built for people who want to actually understand the world, not just watch it. Now let's finish this. Iran's response to the operation was revealing in its own way. The foreign minister spent the hours following the strikes on the phone, reportedly reaching out to Saudi Arabia and Turkey, framing the attacks as unprovoked aggression and invoking the language of international law and sovereign rights. It's worth noting that this was the same government that had just put a missile into an American helicopter and then claimed the aircraft suffered a mechanical failure on its own. On the military side, Iran launched over 20 ballistic missiles at Al-Azraq Air Base in Jordan, the base housing American F-35 fighters, and fired projectiles toward Kuwait. Iranian state media also announced that they had shot down an American MQ-9 Reaper drone the same evening. The Pentagon denied that claim immediately. Here's what actually happened with those missile launches. Every single one was intercepted. Jordan's air defense systems, combined with those of Bahrain and Kuwait, engaged the incoming missiles in the air. Not one made it to a target. The country that had just lost its surveillance network, seen its coastal radar infrastructure destroyed, and watched American robots rescue U.S. pilots from its own patrol zone, then fired 20 missiles and scored 0 hits. The response from Gulf Arab states was swift and unified. Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan issued joint public statements condemning Iran for firing weapons toward their borders. The strategy Tehran had relied on for years, using the threat of pan-Islamic solidarity to fracture Gulf cooperation with the West, collapsed in real time. Iran didn't create a barrier against American power in the region. It pushed every neighbor further away. What's happening right now extends well beyond the Strait of Hormuz. In Europe, NATO entered what military analysts are describing as a kinetic action threshold when a French Rafale fighter jet, operating under Unified Alliance Command, intercepted and shot down a large unidentified drone that crossed into Latvian airspace. This happened while Russian bombers and tactical fighters from the Baltic Fleet were conducting exercises out of Kaliningrad, directly adjacent to NATO's eastern flank. The significance of that intercept is hard to overstate. NATO has been tracking drone incursions near alliance borders for months. Shooting one down, actually firing a live weapon in an allied nation's airspace, represents a threshold crossed. It tells Moscow something specific. The alliance is no longer treating these provocations as incidents to be logged and investigated. It is treating them as violations to be answered. The United States is simultaneously drawing up one of the largest structural reorganizations of its military command architecture in decades. The reported plan would collapse 11 global combatant commands into 8 integrated structures. Central Command covering the Middle East and European Command would be merged under a single unified international structure. Northern Command and Southern Command, which together cover the Americas, including Brazil and the entire Western Hemisphere, would fuse into a unified Americas Command. This is a military designed to fight in multiple theaters simultaneously, not to rotate between them. What does all of this mean when you pull back far enough to see the full picture? It means the era of deterrence through ambiguity, where Iran could threaten, probe, and escalate without crossing a line that brought a permanent consequence, is over. What happened in the Strait of Hormuz was not just a retaliation for a downed helicopter, it was the installation of a new rule. The rule is this: if you attack American assets, the United States will not just hit back, it will remove your ability to attack again. That is a fundamentally different doctrine than what Iran had been operating against for the past 2 decades, and Iran's leadership knows it. The phone calls to Riyadh and Ankara, the public statements about victimhood, the missile volleys that hit nothing, these are not the actions of a government that believes it has strategic options. These are the actions of a government trying to find a face-saving exit before the next phase begins. Qatar is currently serving as a diplomatic back channel, and there are reports of a conversation around whether Iran can access frozen financial assets in exchange for a meaningful step back from its nuclear enrichment timeline. That offer, if it exists, won't stay on the table indefinitely. The Strait of Hormuz is now, for the first time in years, under essentially zero Iranian surveillance. Every ship that passes through it does so outside of Iran's ability to track, target, or intercept. The Revolutionary Guard's entire maritime strategy was built on the assumption that they could see everything that moved through that water. They can't anymore. And here's the thing about losing your eyes. It's not just that you can't see the threat coming. It's that every commander below the supreme leader now knows they can't see it coming. That psychological shift, the one that moves through a military institution when it realizes its surveillance infrastructure was erased in a single night, changes behavior. It makes commanders cautious. It makes them wait for instructions before acting. It slows the whole machine down at exactly the moment when speed is survival. That is what America delivered last night. Not just a blackout, a hesitation, a permanent question mark hanging over every Iranian military decision for the foreseeable future. Do we have enough information to act? Or did we already lose the ability to know? The world you're watching right now is not moving toward a simple resolution. The stakes are too high, the actors too committed, and the technology too new for anyone to predict where the next 30 days end. But you understand the architecture of what just happened. You know what was targeted and why. You know why a ghost ship mattering as much as a fighter jet tells you something profound about where warfare is going. You know why silence, the silence of dead radar dishes on Iranian islands, is more powerful than any explosion. The question now isn't whether America blinked, it's whether Tehran will accept the off-ramp before there are no ramps left. And that answer, one way or another, is coming soon. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening, not just the headlines, but the strategy underneath them, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, share this with someone who's been asking questions about the Middle East, and drop a comment below with one word. Hormuz, if you believe this was a calculated endgame move or flashpoint, if you think this is just the opening chapter of something much larger. Your answer matters. Let's see where this community stands.